When most people think of plants from Plants vs. Zombies, the first one that most of them think of is Peashooter. And well, since Peashooter has a pretty simplistic design and is also the first plant that you get in the game, there has been tons of clones of it over the years. And well, today I'm going to be showing you every single Peashooter clone from officially licensed games. But before we do that, what is considered a Peashooter clone? In my opinion, any plant that's a Peashooter clone should either have a name that's close to Peashooter, functions close to Peashooter, or looks close to Peashooter. So plants like Peanut will count as a Peashooter clone because, well, it basically functions the exact same and also shoots peas. But other plants like pea pod won't count because, well, it's not actually a Peashooter, it's actually a whole separate plant even though it has pea in the name. So yeah, with that all out of the way, let's start with the first Plants vs. Zombies game. Now in the first Plants vs. Zombies game, there's 5 clones being Snow Pea, Repeater, Three-Peater, Split Pea, and Gatling Pea. Now plants like Snow Pea that have basically appeared in every single Plants vs. Zombies game since the original will only be counted once. And that's because in some of the games, the Snow Pea actually has a slightly different name, but it's still basically the exact same plant as well, but has the exact same function. So even though Snow Pea in some games is called Ice Pea, they're still the exact same plant and won't be counted as separate plants. So yeah, moving on to the next game, we have Plants vs. Zombies Endless Edition. This was a Chinese exclusive game and had 2 more Peashooter clones, being the Wukong Pea and the Nezhe Shooter. And well, both of these plants are actually pretty interesting as you could actually move them around the map. And well, these plants actually have a lot more health than the other ones and also have special abilities, like the Wukong Peashooter could actually hit things with a bow staff. So yeah, both of these plants are overall very interesting as they're exclusive to this game and also have some pretty cool functions. And well, with this game we're up to a total of 7 clones so far. Next up is Plants vs. Zombies Adventures, which is probably one of the most forgettable Plants vs. Zombies games as it was only active for a year. But even though this game was only around for the year, it actually had a pretty good amount of Peashooter clones. The 4 Peashooter clones in this game is Flaming Pea, Sweet Pea, Beeshooter, and Ice Queen Pea. Now you're probably wondering why I'm including the Flaming Pea because, well, it's basically the exact same thing as the Fire Peashooter, but it actually has slightly different function. As well, the Flaming Pea was actually a lot more powerful than the Fire Peashooter, so yeah, this one actually has slightly different function. It also has a power up on it. So even though it looks a lot like the Fire Peashooter and sounds a lot like the Fire Peashooter, is actually completely different. And well, same thing with the Ice Queen Pea. Even though it's extremely similar to the Snow Pea, it still has a slightly different function and also has a completely different design. And well, that brings our total up to 11 Peashooter clones so far. And well, that number is about to get a lot higher because moving on, we have Plants vs. Zombies 2. Now there is a lot of Peashooter clones in this game, so I'm just going to go in order from when they were released. Starting off, we have Pea Pod, Peanut, Fire Peashooter, Primal Peashooter, Electric Peashooter, Shadow Peashooter, Goo Peashooter, Sling Pea, Pea Vine, Snap Pea, and Mega Gatling Pea. So yeah, there are lots of Peashooter clones with some of them actually being pretty useless. Like Sling Pea is just really unnecessary as well. We have Pulp Plants for a reason, and also Snap Pea is just kind of a clone of Chomper and Peashooter combined. And I'm considering Mega Gatling Pea separate from normal Gatling Pea just for the reason that it's only slightly different. And in my opinion, they're 2 separate plants, but some people might argue that both the exact same plant, so I'm just going to count Mega Gatling Pea on my list, and if you would disagree with me, then you could subtract 1 at the end of the video. And with all these new Peashooter clones, it actually doubles the amount to 22. And now next up we have Plants vs. Zombies 2 Chinese Edition. Now with how many weird plants are in Plants vs. Zombies 2 Chinese Edition, you expect for there to be a good amount of exclusive Peashooter clones, but you would actually be wrong thinking that because there's only really 1 new Peashooter clone. This being Shadow Vanilla. Now, even though the name's completely different than any other Peashooter, it's still considered a Peashooter in my opinion, as well it has a very similar function and a very similar design. Because if you look at the design, you could kind of see that it's similar to a Peashooter, and well, the function of this plant is very similar to a Peashooter itself. So yeah, I do consider this one a Peashooter as well. And well, there's a lot of other plants in this game that have similar function to a Peashooter, but they're unique enough to not be considered a clone. So yeah, after this game, we bring up the total to 23. Now moving on to our next game, we have Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Now, this game brings us 6 new Peashooter variations being Toxic Pea, Commando Pea, Agent Pea, Law Pea, Berry Shooter, and Plasma Pea. Now there is also a good amount of potted plants in this game, but they're basically all the exact same thing even though they have slightly different names. Because well, the Peashooter in this game is called the Pea Cannon and the Repeater is called the Pea Repeater. So yeah, it's the exact same thing except just with a slightly different name. So that's why I'm not counting them as separate plants as well. They're basically the exact same thing except their name's just different. And well, after these new 6 Peashooters are counted, now we're up to 29 clones so far. And well, moving on to Garden Warfare 2, we actually only have 2 new plants. This being Electro Pea and Rock Pea. And well, even though Electro Pea is very similar to Electric Peashooter, it's still slightly different as well. They have different names and also they have slightly different function. So I'm still counting them as separate plants, bringing up the total to 31. But that's not it for this game because there's actually 2 other Peashooters that are only spawnable plants. These 2 being the Elf Pea and the Pea Witch Cannon. So yeah, even though these are only spawnable plants, they still count as separate Peashooter variations as they have slightly different designs and also have slightly different function, bringing up the total to 33. Now moving on, we have another Chinese exclusive game being Plants vs. Zombies All-Stars. Now with how many new variations of plants we have in this game, you would actually think that there would be a lot more than only 2 new Peashooter clones. And well, the only 2 new Peashooter clones in this game is the Droplet Shooter and the Frostbolt Shooter. These are both just different tiers of the Snow Pea, this Droplet Shooter being the first tier and the Frostbolt Shooter being the third tier. So even though both these plants are very similar to the Snow Pea, they have slightly different attacks and also deal slightly different damage and have different designs, so they're still technically different than the original Snow Pea. And well, this game brings our total up to 35. Now next up we have Plants vs. Zombies Heroes. And well, this game brings a lot of new Peashooter clones. This being Green Shadow, 3 Nut, Sky Shooter, the Podfather, and Cosmic Pea. And while Green Shadow still counts as a Peashooter because even though they don't have Pea or Shooter in the name, it still technically counts because you could clearly tell that the design is a Peashooter. And well, same thing with the Podfather because well, even though it doesn't have Pea or Shooter in the name, it's still obviously a Peashooter. But yeah, this game has 5 new clones, bringing up the total to 40 clones. And well, that's actually the final number of clones that we have because well, Battle for Neighborville and Plants vs. Zombies 3 don't actually have any new Peashooter clones. So yeah, since those games don't have any Peashooter clones, at least not yet for Plants vs. Zombies 3, that brings the total to 40 Peashooter clones. And well, in some people's opinion, it might be 39 because some people don't count Mega Gatling Pea as a separate plant. But yeah, it's honestly kind of insane that they took one plant being the Peashooter and made 40 different variants of it over the years. But yeah, so now you know how many Peashooter clones there is, and well, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, have a great day.